Hello everyone, welcome to another class. This week we'll be working with social classes in England, and the purpose of the class is to analyze the impact of the Industrial Revolution upon the social structure of England. In order to do that, we must look back for clues that will help us understand why and how the English social structure came to be what it was at the beginning of the 19th century. So we're going to go back to feudal times and consider different influences that molded English society into the subsequent periods. We just need to bear in mind, though, that dividing society into main classes and setting up artificial barriers is just for pedagogical reasons. In reality, there is constant interaction between different social forces, and I think this is also true for different aspects of life. They're always interacting with each other. That is to say, if we want to understand the dynamics of a given society, we cannot do it without considering the economic changes as a crucial variable. So, if we're going to study the major changes in class structure that the English society experienced from feudal times until the middle of the 19th century, we have to look at the economic aspect. So, let's start. In the early Middle Ages, feudalism was the social and political domination of a military and landowning aristocracy. It was basically a system of production, and the means of production was the land. The king was the owner of all the land. He kept the richest part, and the rest was granted for military services to his knights and nobles. And below all these classes were the villeins or peasants who tilled the soil and were free. In the late Middle Ages, some forces began to operate, such as nationalism, individualism, and the Black Death. And these forces gradually dissolved the fabric of medieval society. The influence of the Black Death was actually very important because this pestilence killed many people, and there was as a consequence a shortage of labor. So, due to this, the villeins became more aware of the real value of their work, and they took the opportunity to demand their release from labor service in exchange for money. They became less submissive, and they finally broke out in the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. At the same time, costs increased, and the lords had to either turn their lands to pasture or lease them. And the wealthier peasants were able to take up these leases, and they could improve their living conditions, which gave birth to the lower middle class of tenant farmers. This was basically happening in the rural England, but let's turn now to the urban England. In big towns, with the growth of trade, early capitalism, and individualism, many craftsmen began to specialize in the distribution of goods instead of working in the guilds. This association of artisans. This led to the emergence of a higher middle class of merchants and traders. Then, in the Tudor and Stuart times, these higher middle classes consolidated, and they claimed for more government participation and representation. Two important factors contributed to their consolidation. The first one was the selling of lands formerly belonging to the church after the dissolution of monasteries under Henry VIII and his Reformation. And also, the selling of lands at low prices during and immediately after the Civil War. These opportunities were taken by successful merchants, moneylenders, government officials, and professional men who bought these lands, increasing in this way their economic power and improving their social standing. Then, the Industrial Revolution determined the rise of a new powerful class of industrial capitalists. This class was made up by the new business owners, the capitalists. The middle class was also benefited in the middle of the 19th century since they gained seats in the parliament. The larger the Industrial Revolution grew, the more powerful these individuals became. But this was not the case of the working class. The differences between the rich and the poor were now even more accentuated. Economic power was accumulated in fewer hands, while the social degradation of the wage earners increased. The working class lived in dark, crowded, and dirty slums. There was no legal protection, and they suffered from every kind of evil, such as unemployment, low price of labor, irregular payment of wages, insanity working conditions, to just name a few. The interplay of all these factors in the early decades of the 19th century was responsible for the gradual growth of the working class point of view, which would later find expression in an organized labor movement. It took the workers a long time to organize themselves in a common front and achieve their aims. Well, guys, I hope that you find this topic interesting. Remember that you will need to complete a compulsory activity based on this tutorial class. So, well, thank you very much for watching it, and keep on reading the material. Okay? Well, see you in the platform. Bye-bye.